The transfer window has officially opened, and though many supporters would like to see Liverpool sign another midfielder, it's becoming increasingly apparent that Jurgen Klopp's business for the summer is done. This leaves 9 first-team midfielders currently to fill 3 or potentially a curveball of 2 midfield positions. Of these 9 midfield options, plenty of rotation is expected in a hectic schedule which will see the Reds pretty much play 2 matches every week until November's World Cup. But what is the most complete midfield 3? This video sets out to make a comprehensive ranking of Liverpool's most all-round complete midfielder based on their statistics and numbers in last season's Premier League and the Championship for Fabio Carvalho. So without further ado, let's get stuck in and compare the numbers of Liverpool's midfielders. In the first category, we look at players' passing accuracy, arguably the most important attribute for a midfielder. A high-scoring, consistent round for all concerned to get things underway, though a shock straight from the off as Curtis Jones manages to exceed even the great Thiago's passing accuracy, albeit from a smaller sample. And that smaller sample is proven by the next category in passes made per 90 minutes. Carvalho, Fabinho and the Ox can likely blame their low passing numbers due to the fact they don't play in out-and-out box-to-box midfield roles, therefore progress the ball less, but Thiago's passing numbers are resoundingly clear at the top of this list. Moving into assists, there are some decent numbers all around, with Henderson and THIAGO expectedly near the top, and young Fabio Carvalho recording some decent numbers. That said, he was playing in a more advanced number 10 role for the majority of Fulham's season in the Championship, hence the high goal contribution numbers. Though most players didn't record too many assists, they were creating plenty of chances for the time they were on the pitch. The undeniable shock of this list is the impressive creativity of James Milner in his brief and fleeting appearances in a red shirt this season, not to mention HARVEY ELLIOTT creating an average of more than 2 goal-scoring opportunities per 90 minutes on the pitch, without recording a single assist. Let's move away from passing and see which midfielder is the best on the ball when dribbling. Leading the way is Curtis Jones. The young Scouse off to a brilliant start on this list, and his silky progression through the Liverpool midfield is backed up by the numbers, with Fabinho a surprise second place, proving reliable when moving the play through the lines. Fabinho does have a high dribble success ratio, but this is largely due to the fact he doesn't actually dribble that much, as the next category shows. It's Curtis Jones once again leading the way with dribbles per 90 minutes, and the more offensive players such as HARVEY ELLIOTT and Fabio Carvalho are also far more likely to attempt dribbles and take-ons compared to others in this list. Next up, we have the defensive statistics. The most common defensive action for a midfielder is a duel, which can relate to either a 50-50, retaining possession, or winning the ball off the opposition. The typically more offensive players and those less physically imposing, such as HARVEY ELLIOTT and OXLADE-CHAMBERLAIN, are unsurprisingly down the bottom of this list. Perhaps a shock is Henderson losing more than half of his midfield duels, but the rock in the middle Fabinho is unsurprisingly at the top of this list, a player you can always trust in a midfield battle. In the air, it's a similar story, though OXLADE-CHAMBERLAIN, Carvalho and surprisingly NABY KEITA have very poor aerial duel success ratios, with all of them losing almost 75% of every header in the midfield. Fabinho does score highly, but somehow is numerically worse in the air than THIAGO ALCANTARA, who boasts a very impressive 72.7% aerial duel success ratio. In terms of pure tackling, the next stat to compare will be tackles made per 90 minutes. Typically, midfielders have to make between 1 and 2 pure tackles during a game, with THIAGO and Milner both not afraid to get stuck in and put in a huge challenge in the middle of the park. But the clear winner and maybe surprise shout at the top of this list is NABY KEITA, who averages more than 3.5 tackles per game, an incredibly high number for a tenacious midfielder who doesn't shy away from retrieving possession. Next up is interceptions, a stat which at most other clubs would be led by midfielders, though at Liverpool with their advanced gegenpressing ideology, it's actually the forwards who typically intercept the ball more. That said, the Reds midfielders typically average between 1 to 2 interceptions each per match, with James Milner proving the most effective interceptor of the ball last season when on the pitch. Last but by no means least is the stat that everyone looks forward to, shooting. First up, we have shooting accuracy, which is the ratio of shots that hit the target. This is perhaps the category where Liverpool's midfielders need the most work, with an overall shooting accuracy average of less than 25% across Liverpool's midfield last season. That said, the saving grace is the surprise prolificness last season of holding midfielder Fabinho and the very impressive shooting accuracy of new signing Fabio Carvalho. Moving into the category of goals scored last season, the numbers are similarly low for Liverpool's midfielders across the board. Fabinho leads the way with 5 goals scored in the league alone, plus a further 1 in the Champions League and 2 in the FA Cup to reach 8 for the season. And young Fabio Carvalho also racked up a very respectable 10 Championship goals for Fulham, which combined with almost 1 in every 2 shots hitting the target, he could bring some needed goal-scoring threat to the Liverpool midfield. Well, that completes the comparisons across the categories of passing, defending, dribbling and shooting, so who is the most complete all-round midfielder at Liverpool? In 9th place we have Harvey Elliott. After a very promising start to last season, Harvey suffered that horror injury just 1 month into his breakthrough campaign, which in truth derailed the remainder of his year. We all know the quality he possesses, and for such a young player there's definitely plenty more to come, and there are some promising signs within his statistics, particularly with dribbling and ball progression qualities clear for all to see. 8th place and narrowly ahead of Harvey Elliott is Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain. The Ox has struggled of late and his numbers last season demonstrate a dip in form for the injury-prone former England international. His numbers may be slightly affected by the fact he was used in attacking roles at times last season, meaning he contributes less in build-up play and defence, but it comes as no surprise to see the Ox so far down this list. With just 1 year left on his contract, there are calls for some to cash in on the midfielder while the Reds can, though it makes no sense to be removing numbers from a midfield that are already going to struggle. Coming in at number 7 is Liverpool's new signing, Fabio Carvalho. Obviously for Carvalho we had to use his statistics for last season in the Championship, so it's no wonder a player of his calibre performed so well in a division below everyone else on this list. That said, the youngster still delivered when it counted for a team who won a league title, with Carvalho's impressive numbers in midfield, particularly in attack, playing a huge part in their win. Now is where it starts to get very close in the scores and some surprises begin to take place. In at number 6 is surprisingly NABY KEITA. Naby had arguably his best season in a Liverpool shirt last season from an objective standpoint, largely due to him being able to maintain fitness. However, when statistically compared to his fellow midfield teammates, Naby is found wanting. Some surprisingly poor numbers in defence and in front of goal are the downfall for Naby in the list, and the player who has often divided opinion during his time at Anfield is numerically the 6th in line to a starting place based on this list. Into the top 5 and a shock entry in at number 5 is James Milner. Obviously, Milner played a very small role last season and his appearances were scarce. That said, when he is on the pitch, the veteran does make it count, with fantastic numbers both on and off the ball when called upon, and Milner doesn't let the side down. That said, despite coming 5th, he certainly won't be 5th in line to a starting place, simply due to his age and declining physical capabilities. That said, he's definitely not a bad option to have on the sidelines. 4th place and narrowly missing out on a top 3 position by a mere point is surprisingly club captain and the man who made the most appearances last season in Jordan Henderson. Having played so much football last season, it's no real surprise that Henderson's numbers mean he slightly misses out on a top 3 position, but he does have some very impressive stats nonetheless. With leadership skills and qualities that are numerically immeasurable, Hendo also boasts some great numbers in regard to his passing and dribbling, though surprisingly had some of the worst defensive contributions with the fewest duels and defensive success ratios. Another shock in at number 3 and earning his place in Liverpool's most complete midfield is Curtis Jones. The true surprise of this list, Curtis is head and shoulders clear of the other midfielders in terms of dribbling and ball progression, a clear standout quality of the young Scouse midfielder. That was perhaps to be expected, but another surprise came in Curtis's defensive contributions, where he's right up there with the best, not to mention boasting a higher passing accuracy than the maestro THIAGO. The upcoming season could prove to be a huge one for Curtis, and who knows, the numbers support his case to claim a starting role in Liverpool's midfield. With a clear gap between the top 2 and the rest of the pack, 2nd place on this list belongs to Fabinho. Fabinho is the best defensive player Liverpool have in a number of categories, a claim that is clear for all to see as he develops into one of the world's best number 6s, supported by the stats in this video. But what's more surprising is a very high dribble success ratio and an immaculate and persistent passing record. This season we've seen a far greater goal contribution performance from the Brazilian as well. In his most prolific season to date, Fabinho racked up the most goals of all Liverpool midfielders and his shooting accuracy is far clear of the others. Someone who is rightly perceived as an out-and-out defensive midfielder, the Brazilian is actually far more of a complete midfielder than most perceive. And claiming top spot on this list, which may come as no surprise, is THIAGO ALCANTARA. You could rinse a thesaurus finding enough words to describe this wonderful midfield talent, and it would still somehow feel like you haven't done him justice. Not only is THIAGO the most complete Liverpool midfielder, he is also right up there with the very best on the continent, with a remarkable pass accuracy, especially when you consider he typically makes twice as many passes as most other midfielders per 90 minutes. He is immovable in possession with fantastic ball retention and dribble success ratios, not to mention creating an average of 2 goal-scoring opportunities every match. Defensively is perhaps the surprise with Thiago, something you don't always notice, with the Spaniard having a remarkable dual and aerial success rate in the middle of the park. He isn't afraid to get stuck in with tackles and interceptions. And that completes the rankings for Liverpool's most complete midfielder. Let's have a recap and show you how each player scored. In 9th we have Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain, 8th Harvey Elliott, 7th Fabio Carvalho, 6th NABY KEITA, 5th James Milner, 4th Jordan Henderson, 3rd Curtis Jones, 2nd Fabinho, and 1st place belongs to THIAGO ALCANTARA.